On the morning of August 13th, 2018, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Frederick, Colorado woke up to something deeply unsettling. A pregnant woman and her two young daughters had suddenly vanished without a trace. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken windows, no screams heard during the night. Just an empty house, unanswered phone calls, and a husband who claimed he had no idea what had happened to his family. At first, investigators believed they were dealing with a missing persons case. But as the hours passed, something about the situation began to feel wrong. Within days, a disturbing truth would begin to surface, one that shocked the entire country. Because the man standing on his porch, pleading for his family to return, was hiding a secret far darker than anyone imagined. This is the disturbing case of Chris Watts. From the outside, the Watts family appeared to live a happy and comfortable life. Chris Watts lived with his wife Shanann and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste, in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by other young families. Shanann was active on social media and often shared videos and photos of their daily life. In those videos, she laughed with her daughters, celebrated birthdays, and talked about the future. To anyone watching online, they seemed like the perfect family. Chris appeared quiet and reserved. He worked as an oil field operator and was described by co-workers as calm, polite, and hardworking. Friends said he was a devoted father who loved spending time with his daughters. But behind the scenes, the picture was beginning to crack. The couple had been struggling with financial problems, and their marriage had grown tense. Arguments had become more frequent, and their relationship was no longer what it once seemed. Around this time, Chris had also begun a secret relationship with another woman. It was something he kept carefully hidden from friends, co-workers, and most importantly, his wife. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and this one would soon lead to a devastating outcome. Late on the night of August 12, 2018, Shanann returned home from a business trip. Security footage captured her entering the house just after 2 a.m. carrying her suitcase. It would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. The next morning, things quickly started to feel wrong. Shanann missed a scheduled doctor's appointment, which was unusual for her. She wasn't answering phone calls or text messages from friends. One of her close friends grew worried and decided to drive to the house to check on her. When she arrived, she noticed Shanann's car was still parked in the driveway. That was strange. If Shanann had gone somewhere, she would have taken the car. When no one answered the door, the friend contacted the police. Officers arrived at the house and began looking around. Inside, they noticed several alarming details. Shanann's phone was still there. Her purse was still inside. Her medications had been left behind. It didn't look like someone who had packed up and left voluntarily. Something was clearly wrong. Not long after the police arrived, Chris Watts returned home. At first, he seemed concerned. He told officers he didn't know where his wife and children had gone. Later that day, he spoke to local news reporters outside the house. Standing in front of the cameras, he asked for his family to come home. He said he just wanted them back safely. To some viewers, he looked like a worried husband. But to investigators watching closely, his behavior seemed strange. His tone felt off. His body language didn't match the emotion of the situation. It was subtle, but it was enough to raise suspicion. Detectives decided to look deeper into the case.
As the investigation continued, cracks began appearing in Chris's story. A neighbor allowed police to view security camera footage from his home. The video showed Chris backing his truck into the driveway early that morning, something he almost never did. On the footage, he could be seen walking back and forth between the house and the truck, loading items into the vehicle. The angle didn't clearly show what he was putting inside, but investigators immediately found it suspicious. When detectives asked Chris about the footage, his explanation seemed nervous and inconsistent. His story kept changing in small but important ways. Eventually, investigators asked him to take a polygraph test. Chris agreed. The results came back quickly, and they were clear. Chris Watts had failed the polygraph test. When detectives confronted him with the results, the atmosphere in the interrogation room shifted. The calm and cooperative husband suddenly seemed trapped by the growing evidence against him. Detectives continued asking questions, carefully pointing out the inconsistencies in his story. For a moment, Chris remained silent. Then he began to speak. At first, he tried to shift the blame, claiming that Shanann had harmed the children and that he reacted in anger. But investigators sensed the story still didn't add up. They pressed further. Slowly, the truth began to unravel. Eventually, Chris Watts confessed to the murders of his pregnant wife and his 2 young daughters. The details that followed were horrifying. After killing Shanann inside their home, he loaded her body into his truck in the early hours of the morning. Then he drove to a remote oil site where he worked. There he buried Shanann in a shallow grave. But what investigators discovered about the children was even more disturbing. Bella and Celeste were taken to the same site and placed inside large oil storage tanks. It was a crime so shocking that even experienced investigators struggled to comprehend it. The quiet father who had appeared on television begging for his family's safe return had been responsible for their deaths all along. As news of the crime spread, the public reaction was one of disbelief and horror. Many people had watched Chris's television interview only days earlier, believing they were seeing a grieving husband desperate to find his missing family. Instead, they had been watching a man hiding an unimaginable secret. Chris Watts was arrested and later pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder. In court, he was sentenced to several life sentences without the possibility of parole. The case became one of the most disturbing family tragedies in recent American history. For many people, the most chilling part of the story was how ordinary Chris Watts appeared. He lived in a normal neighborhood, worked a normal job, and looked like a typical father raising his children. There were no obvious warning signs that something this horrific could happen. But behind the image of a perfect suburban family, a darkness had been growing quietly until it finally erupted in the worst possible way. Today, the Watts case remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the most terrifying crimes are not committed by strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes they happen inside ordinary homes, hidden behind closed doors where no one else can see the truth until it is far too late. If you want to hear more disturbing true crime stories like this, subscribe to Midnight Crime Stories, because sometimes the darkest secrets are the ones hiding in plain sight.